Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSPmagazine. You're listening to a new Redefining Security podcast. Have you ever thought that we are selling cybersecurity insincerely, buying it indiscriminately, and deploying it ineffectively? Perhaps we are. So let's look at how we can organize a successful InfoSec program that integrates people, process, technology, and culture to drive growth and protect business value. Knowledge is power, now more than ever. HITRUST is a leading data protection standards development and certification organization that strives to safeguard sensitive information and manage information risk for global organizations across all industries and throughout the third-party supply chain. Learn more at hightrustalliance.net.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
And you are very welcome to a new episode of Redefining Security here on ITSP Magazine. I'm flying solo today, and I'm going to fill up the time with goodness with two amazing guests. One's been on the show, another one has been on other shows new to ITSP Magazine. Rock, good to have you back on. Dutch, pleasure to meet you, man.
Awesome, thanks.
Thanks, Sean.
And listen, we don't have a lot of time. We got to get into this, and we're going to grade ourselves at the end. So quit messing around. Let's start talking security culture. Go.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I mean, that's a kind of a famous line from a legendary management consultant, Peter Drucker. And I'll just tag on to that I'll amend it to say culture eats all of the security controls that we could possibly put into place for breakfast. So, culture by definition is the things that you are, not as you do. And, I think we have to stop just shoving technical security controls down people's throats and start promoting the culture from within. Aside from the technical controls, right? We have people, process, and technology.
I'm going to stop you there, Rock.
For a reason.
I'm
Yep.
going to stop you there, Rock. And
I'm
Dutch,
ranting.
And Dutch, the thing you're about to say, don't say it. Say something else.
I think that people,
No, not that. Something else.
there's a way to measure culture that makes it meaningful, and you can do positive steps in a fashion that people can internalize. And we have to orient on those things for the average employee, not for the security team. Because if we don't get every employee involved in making security part of the culture, we will fail. Full stop.
Nice. And I was playing with you there a little bit. You probably wonder what the hell is this guy doing?
No,
I wanted to put a little pressure on both of you and kind of take you from where you're wanting to go or thinking we were going to go. And I don't know. I feel like that may be the role the CISO experiences or the environment the CISO experiences all the time. What you're about to say, that's not what we're interested in. Say something different. Say something else. And you're talking about controls in the context of culture. What does that even mean? So that uncomfortable, weird moment there now. Let's really get into this because and I know, Dutch, you in one of your posts, you mentioned that a lot of people, CISOs in particular, say that culture is very squishy.
Yes.
And with that, what's that blob look like? And is a big blob good, or does that blob should it be small? Or so is it full of numbers or water? What is it?
Yeah,
what is
I think that's probably just a generally good snapshot of where we are, right? So where we've come from is, and it's kind of ties to some degree to Rock's comments, right? Is that on average, an enterprise CISO today came up through the ranks and has the 10,000 hours. And there's an awesomeness to that. Having said that, it doesn't always translate automatically or easily to the other parts of the business. And now that security has made it to the adult table, you have to be able to articulate what the business initiatives are. You have to your own team, explain, well, what does this mean, right? And so that when they're focused on XYZ project, which is commensurate with their skill and what they're focused on, it has to tie to something. And then more objectively, it has to be able to drive culture, right? We know from George Finney's work that poor culture equals more breaches. That's great work. That not poor security culture, poor culture equals more breaches. That should have been, if you didn't need an alarm bell, that should be an alarm bell, right? That we have to rethink how we approach it. And Rock's right. I mean, you talk about controls, that's important, right? But that's important from a quantitative, I'm a sysadmin manager, team lead, that level. It's not that it's not important, but that's not how you articulate it to the business. And it's certainly not how you get people excited about doing culture, because you have to get the CFO, the CMO, the CEO, the VPs of lines of business. Everybody has to understand at a reasonable level, what does this mean? And it can't be, we do awareness. Awareness is awesome. I'm not saying don't do awareness. I don't want to have all my awareness friends yelling at me. That's not what I mean. But that's a piece of it, right? Awareness is not understanding. Those are two different things.
Yeah, and Rock, your thoughts on this? Because I often joke that every company has a bug bounty program, whether they know it or not. And I'll equally say every company has a culture. It may not be the one that they want. So talk to me a little bit about that, both company-wide and then also security culture.
Yeah, so culture in general, right, has to be driven from the top down. It has to be your organization's core values, and that needs to be defined by the board of directors on down. Board of directors, through the executive leadership team, through the VPs and the mid-level managers, all the way down to the individual contributor. And then it's got to tie back up, right? And then the individual contributor needs to understand how their contributions to the organization, security or not, tie back up to the organizational goals and values as a whole. And it's the same thing with security culture. It's got to be established from the board of directors on down. And then the individual contributor understanding what they're doing, whether they're on the security team or an accountant, contribute to that. And I'll flip it to say culture of security on back up, tying to the organizational values. And, what really makes it difficult, much like how there's no agreed upon definition of culture or what a good culture is, there's also no singular definition of what a good security culture is or cybersecurity culture is. So, I mean, there are, I think, some things that are maybe indicative of a strong culture within an organization that we can get into, but I definitely want to get Dutch's thoughts on that.
Yeah, so Sean, I want to take you back to your comment, right, about the uncomfortableness. Culture is not necessarily what an executive might say who sits at corporate headquarters, right? Culture is what, and Rock touched on this, right? It's what people perceive. It's what that person in Biloxi, Mississippi in the warehouse, it's what they say it is, right? So to bring those two things together, you can measure your culture. And I would encourage people to do this, because your chief people officer, those folks do understand how to do this. We've had models for 40 years on culture. Well, the gap is that many of the folks who are senior directors of security moving into CISO positions today didn't have a grounding in that, depending on their background, right? So if you didn't have a business degree, you don't have an MBA, that's not a ding, but you would have caught it like Rock and I did there. But a lot of people didn't have that as a background of their training. The culture models exist, and I could try out 5 of them. You can pick one. It doesn't even really matter, because you can measure that. And you can do easy quiz questions on a day-to-day basis, and you can start to measure, oh gosh, are we think we're consensus-based, but our people say we're actually pretty hierarchical and top-down. We think we're collegial, but our people actually say we're pretty directive, And so you've got to be aware of that. And it starts with, you just have to gather the data, right? There's a bunch of just general models. They're all great in terms of, like, if you had to go grab something today, Carrie Perlson and Kaman Huang from MIT have a great cybersecurity model for culture. Values, attitudes, and beliefs. I'll just, tell you, those are the 3 levers that are simple. People understand those, and it ties to what Rock said, right? Values, attitudes, and beliefs. You don't change people's beliefs, but you can appreciate where they come from, right? But so you can make it tangible. And so all the things that Rock said totally make sense. We have to help that director of application security who's going to take that CISO role. Now, how do I make that real? Like, what do I do with that? I'm nodding. I get it. Like, we've got to hand them matrix, simple things that they can do, not only to develop the culture upwards and tie into it, but candidly to help coach their people. What does culture look like? To take it away from that squishy blob and say, hey, here's 5 things that we think about, or maybe we start with 3. And we check ourselves and we check our people, not only our people, but the people, right? The actual stakeholders, and make sure that we're on track, because we're probably off track too. We think we're doing a great job in security, and the application folks are like, nah, not so fast, because there's probably not been a great communication path historically there.
Yeah. And it's, from my perspective, it's how you live and breathe. And I want your thoughts on this, because I put you both on the spot, right? Rock, go. Dutch, don't say what you're going to say. It's how you respond in moments of uncertainty and ambiguity that you then turn to your gut, where you're comfortable, what you've experienced comes back to play. And I feel that that's the moment where culture really is defined. And so maybe your thoughts on that, but also the other thing I'm thinking here is that culture doesn't necessarily mean a great work environment. It may be we care about our employees and our culture is one that supports them and protects them from burnout and gives them time off, and we have a good balance, work-life balance. That may be the culture. But it may be very well defined as we are going to be competitive as hell. We're going to be aggressive in this space. We're going to take the market by storm. We expect our employees to drive as hard as we want them to achieve those goals. And that may be the culture, right? And then following from the security perspective, you better be prepared for 24/7 nation state attacks, whatever market you might find some threats that you're facing as a security team that put you under pressure as well. So it may be high pressure, not necessarily a good environment to work in. So tell me a little bit about your experiences, because I know both of you have had good runs at different places and connect with lots of folks all over the place. Your experiences of how an organization translates what they want to achieve into how they want their people to act. Dutch.
Yeah, so for me, I'll juxtapose this, right? I was a military officer, right? So it's talk to us, we talk about it, we read history on it, and we fail and we retreat and we try to do better. So I will tell you, it was probably one of the most jarring or off-putting things to move into civilian roles, where I felt the lack of it. I couldn't have told you in advance, but wait a minute, we don't all sort of align on these things. And not that maybe we do, but we don't even talk about them. So what I was saying, the learning point from there is that I've been in cultures that were, again, it's not a good, bad thing, kind of to both of your points, right? But I've been in cultures where I knew what the culture was, and it was talked about, and I feel comfortable that generally everybody understood what the culture was, and then we could align ourselves and then build our strategies, whatever our domain was, to tie into that. I've been at other places where if you push me, over a scotch, I don't know if I could tell you what the culture was. I could tell you how it felt to me at times, but I couldn't tell you 3 bullet points on the culture. And so that would be the first thing I'd say is just go figure out what your culture is. Not where you aspire to be. Where's the culture today, right? And again, there's super simple things that you can do. There's a bunch of just questions and things you can ask. And again, I'd lean on your talent officer, your people officer. They understand this at a much greater level than I do. But what is your culture now? And everybody needs to know that.
Give us an idea of what a couple questions might be.
How do you feel connected with other people who are outside of your group? Simple things like that to understand. Are we, it doesn't have to be aligned, but do you have people that you can talk to when you get frustrated by a process? There's simple things like that. And if you tee those up, you can get a kind of some kind of feedback on where are we, right? Again, I think most places I've been think that there's a lot of consensus happening. And I think that sometimes that person in Biloxi, Mississippi would disagree, and you just have to ask them those questions. Do you feel listened to, right? When you disagree about a topic, does somebody actually listen to that and then take your opinion into account, right? So that would tell you there's some, bottom up. There's just like, there's like a slew of them, but you could ask probably one simple one a day, and over some time, you get a good snapshot, and you'd feel oh, wow, this deputy CISO over here is doing great, and the VP of XYZ, we need to maybe just align them. And the way that you do that is through stories, right? You hold that up because people learn through stories, not through control mechanisms, not through charts. The charts are for us to kind of like look at something and go back and forth on, is this where we want to be? But the way they learn that is just like with our kids. If I say once upon a time, right, everybody's I'm going to lean forward because now you've teed me up, right? You need to tell stories. So whatever your culture is in terms of town halls, whatever it is that you guys, however the executives connect with the people, you need to tell the stories there. And you need to be explicit about, hey, we've decided we really want to focus on culture and around these couple of things. We're going to start with assessing where we are. Hey, I'm going to come back to you and tell you, here's where we were. Here's where we'd hope to be. Here's the 2 or 3 things that we're going to do, but also I want to give an example of how Sean did this thing in the warehouse in Biloxi, Mississippi, that is a perfect example of, consensus building, because he went to the people in operations and he went to the people in finance, and he figured out that this process had a lot of waste. And so we figured out a way around that. So you tell those stories, but in a human way. So Sean goes, oh, cool, I was doing the right thing, right? Because to your point, Sean, that's the culture fills in the gaps, right? When an individual contributor or even a team lead doesn't exactly know what to do because there's not like a clear-cut thing, and they make that decision you hope would align with the culture. But if they don't know, you kind of left them in a lurch, frankly, because they have to make a decision. They make the best decision, probably think they can, but they don't know. So that helps them guide them. It just makes it simpler. So you don't have to have these long, tedious lists of things. You go, hey, these are the 3 things. And like you said, Sean, it could be we're ultra competitive and we want to move from 4th to 2nd. Okay. And everybody knows. So then we know, okay, I know where I need to get into the canoe to do that thing, or I'm going to go stand on the bank, and wave to you guys and figure out where my exit strategy is in the best possible way, because maybe it doesn't align with, where I want to be. So.
Yeah, and Dutch alluded to this. It comes down to what Jocko Willink calls commander's intent, right? Yeah. Where culture is what your organization does when you're not there. Mm-hmm. And for me, I worked for a large e-commerce company, many years ago, but we all understood that it was all about the seller, right? Every decision that we made, we had to have the seller in mind, right? The seller experience was paramount because the sellers were using the platform to make a living, feed their families, pay their bills. And, with the seller experience in mind, then we could have the buyer experience in mind as well, because a better buyer experience leads to a better seller experience. And so we all understood that, from the product teams all the way down to the security guys who are trying to protect the whole machine. It comes down to commander's intent. Another time when I've seen really successful culture of security is where there's been a high level of trust within the organization, from employees all the way up to the leadership team and down, right? And I think it's Covey who says, it's got like 4, call them pillars or tenets of trust, which is integrity, intent, capabilities, and results. And a high level of trust leads to direct correlation between a high level of trust within the organization and culture, and a strong culture.
How important is belief in what you're trying to achieve, and perhaps maybe even sprinkled with some inspiration or charisma to be part of what we're trying to achieve? Is that important in this, or no?
I think your ability to get behind the mission, I don't know if that necessarily drives to an organizational culture. If you're not in a role or at a company where you don't believe in the mission, you shouldn't be at the company, right? So that's more of a personal accountability thing.
What if you're the only one? You're the only one that can do it, and they pay you a shitload of money.
Right. I was saying,
then you put extrinsic value above intrinsic value, right? At some point, though, my experience, I mean, both personally and what I have seen across my entire career, is eventually that extrinsic value, that monetary value, that's great, but your stress levels and your mental health erode away to the point where that monetary value, it's not worth it anymore, and you bounce.
Some people have to pay the mortgage though, Rock. To be fair, right? I mean, if I'm starting out and I'm making a career transition, I was a single parent, I'm breaking in, I'm transitioning from the military, whatever it might be. I mean, sometimes you have to have a job, right? And so there, I think what you can do as a good leader is you can be aware that, hey, look, I wish, or I would aspire that the overall culture of this company has 20,000 people and I have 20 people, right? But you can still take care of your people. You can do your part of that, right? And so I'm sure you guys have experienced, I have, where I wouldn't necessarily say I love the overall culture of the organization, because I've been at some really large ones as well. But my team had a good culture, right? And so that's the leadership. I mean, it can be team lead, manager, whatever. And I would just say that. So, I mean, it's okay. Because I think sometimes we have to go back to but I'm a manager. I only have 12 people, right? And I can't tell the CEO and the board what to do. No, but you can take care of you and your people, right? As much as you can, right? And so I agree with you. Ideally, Rock, it's extrinsic and intrinsic line up, but sometimes that's just not the ground truth. It's not the way it is for that individual. So, but that team lead, that manager, that director, they can make their portion of it be as good as you possibly can be. Hey, on our team, this is what we agree on these three things. This is what we do. This is how we, balance workload. This is how we look after each other. This is how we are, and so I think we should keep that in mind too, that we don't always get to be the C-level and make those choices. We got to make sure that we're doing things at the team level that they feel like they actually have an impact. And I agree, you've got to understand and believe, I think, Sean, to your question, right? What the thing is that we're trying to accomplish, right? So the military is really strong in this. And I think that there's a learning point, without being grandiose, that you need that on teams too, right? Because Americans, particularly based on our psychology, if we don't understand our piece of the overall puzzle and what two levels above us are going to do, which is where commander's intent comes from, right? Then it's very hard for Americans in particular to buy in because of our psychology. We really want to believe in the thing that we're doing. And all the evidence that I see is that will continue. So, Rock and I have gray hair. I mean, people under the age of, at a younger age sustainability, DEI, are you doing the right things? This is really, really, I look at my oldest, is about to turn 18. That's important to them. And so we have to keep an eye on that as well, that if you can and talk about that consistently, candidly, transparently, as much as you can, then it helps people understand, well, gosh, I see where I fit in. I see what I do in accounting, or what I do in sales, or what I do in the SOC, right? Matters. It matters, not just to me, but it matters to the whole. And that's super important, I think, to get people, I don't like the word buy-in because it sounds very slick, but to get people to understand, did I do a good job today? Because some days it's hard. On hard days, it's really hard to, unless you have a really black and white kind of, checkbox job, sometimes it's hard to go home and go, did I do a good job today? And when you're 22, you need to know that.
Yeah. So talk to me about that. I'm a program manager at heart, so I look at everything like a project. And I'm wondering, can culture be managed like a project? Does it have a set of requirements and the timeline and milestones? And do you do stand-up calls every day to say we're on track to achieve our mission for our culture? Can you be treated like a project?
I think so. Rock, do you want to go first?
I've never really thought about it that way. So no, I don't want to go first.
I think the answer is yes, because so let's start with a model, right? Just pick one. It almost doesn't even matter, right? But if we don't have a process and we don't have measurements, we're just fooling around, right? So pick a model, right? And then be empirical, just gather evidence first, just gather data. So where are we relative to the model that we decided that we're going to pick that we think is simple and we can make an impact? And then go, okay, well, now we got information, now we have data, maybe we can turn that information. And then you can imagine as a project, you say, hey, like in this spectrum, we want to be more consensus building relative to the axis, which says that it's hierarchical. We just push things down. Let's just take that as a simple one of the axes, right? And you start to measure that. And today, maybe we're 2.8 based on what the people say. And you measure that. You measure that based on town halls or interactions or whatever those are, but also just questions. You can do a daily question. I've been at companies, we do daily questions. I don't always see the results of those, but I can understand what those are feeding into. And then you talk about them. So in that kind of a culture, then on a monthly or quarterly meeting, you say, hey, we went from 2.8 and we're making steps. We're at 3.1. Guys, we really want to get to 4. Just as an aspiration, but here we are. And then maybe you move up and down and you say, whoa, gosh, that was a rough quarter, whatever. Maybe there's external factors or whatever. But you can absolutely, from my perspective, I've seen it managed that way. And I think you can do what I would call sort of internal CSAT, right? We CSAT customers, CSAT your own people. I mean, they're your customers from my perspective, right? So I think you can. And I think it would be it's powerful when you can have different teams say, hey, I'm trying to align on this thing and you're trying to align on this thing. How do we, it's those uncomfortable conversations where, you're not quite aligned, but the culture will see you through. We can agree to disagree if we can go, okay, well, I see this is where we need to move. So I think the answer is yes.
And Rock, do you feel that, 'cause I keep envisioning, okay, you start asking the employees these questions and you either get short, terse responses that have no substance to them, or there's just no participation at all, which in itself is a sign of the culture, right? Yeah. Or you get what they think you want to hear as a response, because they think they're going to be judged on how they feel. So how do you, I suspect both of you have experienced this, how do you move through some of those challenges, assuming that exists? And
I think it's important, and I know Dutch is a proponent of this. As leaders, we need to work on emotional intelligence, having emotional intelligence as leaders, because I think that is what allows us to have the appropriate amount of empathy and insight into the people that we're leading to be able to suss that out, right? So be able to suss out, is that answer they're giving me really honest and complete? Is it BS? Is it what they, tell me what I think I want to hear? Because I know what makes this individual tick, and I know we didn't achieve any of those during this quarter, yet they're giving me this answer. Something doesn't connect. I need to go dig a little deeper. I think emotional intelligence, there will help us a long way. And, building that emotional intelligence helps us in so many other aspects of leadership, particularly from an empathy standpoint, from being able to read other people's minds, bodies, emotion standpoint, to really get to the bottom of the issue.
Yeah, I think that we have to have more conversations and where we have whatever data and information that we do have, right? So Rock's, throwing out some great ones already, right? So in the same way that I can tell you that based on George's research that you're 3 times more likely to have a breach if you have a poor culture, however we define poor, right? In this case, it was Glassdoor. In case anybody's curious, that's what he used as a simple way of measuring it in comparative sense, right? Because it's comparative for the, you have to have those kinds of pieces of information too, because if you do have people who trend towards analytical and trend towards data, you need to have that, right? So you need to say, look, the research shows, and there's now a body of 25 years of research that emphatically shows that a better culture, however we define better, right? A better culture is higher revenue, more resiliency, meaning the company's still there 10 years later, significantly higher shareholder returns. Okay, so wow. So now you've checked off the board's interested, right? The executive's interested. What else? Well, it leads to better hiring and retention. Okay, wow. Now you're down. Now you're the next level down, right? And what else does it lead to? It leads to people saying, I feel better and more connected with because the 3 of us work together, right? So now you have the employees, right? So culture is absolutely a driver towards the business, and you have to be able to explain to them. You have to say, look, EQ is 2.5 more times likely to predict your success here than your IQ. That's what the research shows. And we have to have, and again, so that's the stuff, to Rock's point, that could be done one-on-one. It could be in a small team meeting. It doesn't have to always come from the CEO or from the CISO, but everybody's got to be able to have, internalize it and talk about it in a way that helps onboard people and helps them understand that this is actually really important to us, right? Because the evidence is having 5,000 vendors, and I've worked at many, many vendors, so it's not knocking vendors, but that has not solved our problems, guys. Having a lot of different frameworks so far, not really solved our problems. Have a lot of control mechanisms so far, not really solved our problems.
We just need that one more framework.
We need to, absolutely.
That includes them all.
We should just do one right after the show and come up with another matrix. And again, I'm being tongue in cheek because they have utility, but as a direction, the evidence would say that has not really moved the needle, right? So we've got to lean into emotional intelligence. We have to lean into everybody has to get engaged, or we cannot win this fight. Like, you just can't. You don't have enough security people. We don't have enough tools. There's never going to be enough of those things. We've got to fundamentally rethink this. And to your opening, and Rock touched on this, right? Because you're right. I was going to say something as soon as he started talking. People, process, and technology. Absolutely, right? It's a great way to have a conversation. But the other piece of that is leadership, strategy, culture. And it's those three that will unlock the people, process, technology. We've got to get oriented on that. And in candor, security is nascent relative to the other domains. And we should take a page and learn from them. There's a paper written in 1981 that says, should CIOs be admins, or should they be people managers? Wow, does that sound familiar? From 1981. Okay, so we can learn from other, and that's sometimes too a thing that security, like any domain, like we're like, oh, this is what we do in finance. This is, we're all, any group is guilty of insular thinking like that. We got to go look at other stuff and say, what do we do to break down these barriers? Because we got to do better.
So are you telling me that this year's NIST CSF update isn't going to solve all our problems?
Oh man, my NIST people are going to yell at me.
Done.
No, but you have to pick and choose, right? I mean, time and energy, it's your most valuable resource that we have with our people. So, I mean, pick a couple things.
100% right.
Pick a couple things, because you got to have things to orient on, right? But don't presume that those are going to solve the problem. They're not going to solve. People solve problems, not matrices. Right? It's great. It's sort of like we talk about. Do those so that you can try to quantify whatever is quantifiable. But at the end of the day, our job is about quality and about people. So we've got to just get better. I just want to see the next generation, right? Because I've had directors be like, I didn't learn any of this stuff in college. I'm like, right, it's because it's because that's not what you were studying. It's okay. But the models are out there. Trust me, they're out there. They're not that hard, right? We just have to start talking about this. Hey, let's orient on culture. What's our strategy? I could ask that question of a lot of folks, and I'm not going to get a real solid answer, Sean. I'm going to get a lot of security nerdy stuff, right? And I'm going to get metrics and stuff. And by the way, I love that. I mean, I actually like.
Oh, you need those too. It's not, you can't trade one.
Absolutely, it's fun to talk about, but that's not probably fun for the other, the other VPs, the other people to talk about. It doesn't engage them, right? We got to just so we got to kind of lead the way there too, and help give our people. What are the stories? What are the sound bites? What are the little bits and pieces that you can grab onto to help you understand? Hey, you're a manager. Are you talking to managers in other departments right now? Because you should be. And I don't mean just the devs. I mean the rest of the departments. They're like, yeah, I talk to IT and dev. You're like, okay, cool, awesome. Let's get farther.
Yeah, I like where you're going with this, Dutch. And so in the last few moments here, maybe it's a fast round of tips, because what I really want to focus on is, you said lead. So that leadership level, just kind of in the middle, and looking at strategy. So culture, hard to get your hands wrapped around. Tactical, we're already deep into it, right? So that strategy level, how does a leader share down, pull up, share up, and pull down? So best practices, a few tips in any of those directions as a leader to ultimately drive culture. But let's start maybe with the strategy.
I think I'll say that number one, it's understanding your audience, because like to Dutch's point, some will really eat up the analytics. Some will really eat up, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years and this has been my experience in the storytelling version of it. And just like, the Broncos are hiring or just hired a new coach. And, one of the questions at his press conference is, how much are you going to lean on analytics? And his response was effectively, well, analytics is a part of the game, evaluate, but it's not the entire game, right? And there is room in this world for both. And I think it really starts with understanding the audience to be able to craft the message and the stories accordingly, both pulling up, and then pulling down. Sharing what your team's concerns are upwards, and then sharing the organizational goals, missions, and insights downwards to your team.
Yeah, so I think, Sean, if I understood your question, I'll try to map what I heard. I think I heard Rock say, right? So depending on where you are and what level you are, and again, maybe you have 20 employees, maybe you have one, maybe you have 20,000, right? But there's a couple of things that you can just orient on, and you can figure out where your piece of it is, right? So the vision is where we're headed. The mission is, why are we doing this thing, right? And then we can align a mission, okay? The next down is strategy. In big bouncy terms, how are we going to do the things that we do? And then at the bottom, if we were building a pyramid, is tactics, Sean, which is what you just mentioned, right? That's the what, okay? And Steve Katz says, we're really good at talking about the what. We're really good at talking about that because it's concrete, it's tangible. We probably trend from analytical backgrounds, right? Okay, that's fine. It is the base, so I think the middle, Sean, to answer your question, is the strategy piece, and that's how are we going to do that? So you need to give your folks just enough guardrails so that they have leeway, that they can make decisions, but they know where their left and right boundaries are. And by the way, and the other teams know where their left and right boundaries are, right? And so strategy is the how. And so depending on where you are in that strategy or tactical mix, right, you may not to get set the vision, you may not to get set the mission. That's, unless you're Rock, right? And you're the owner, right? but you can impact strategy and you can impact tactics. And if you're really at the tactical level, that's okay. Then you should be pushing up and going, okay, so which piece of the strategy does what I do fit into? And those are a simple way of articulating that up, down, left, and right to everybody.
And is it a safe, I hate to make assumptions, but if you're at the tactical level, the culture should make it comfortable to share up as opposed to waiting for the leader to query, hey, what's going on here? What is what you do work toward achieving the strategy that's working toward the mission and vision? Yeah,
in lieu of the guidance, you should create it, right? Yeah. Again, to as best as you can from where you are. And then maybe I take that to Rock, and Rock's like, these two things I am with, but this third thing, I don't know if we can invest the time and resources this year. And then that will hopefully trigger a conversation if it hasn't already occurred for him then to share with me, right? But you've got to, if you don't have it, put it on a freaking napkin, put it on a whiteboard. I mean, just start that, because that will trigger the conversation. And then Rock and, or Sean, you can redirect me if if one of my three things isn't, what it was supposed to be. But take it. Leadership doesn't require you to have a title. And so you can manage the piece that you can manage, right? Purpose, direction, mentoring, motivation, right? And you can manage those things if you have 2 people or 20 or 2,000, doesn't matter, right? So take the piece, you have to have ownership, right? Hopefully the culture says that, but even if it doesn't, to Rock's point, you can take ownership because you'll feel better. You'll feel intrinsically better if you take ownership of what you can reasonably own and impact. You'll be more charged up. Your people, if you manage people, will be more excited and engaged. They'll ask you questions like, "Oh my God, I didn't think about it that way," and then that'll cause you to retune the messaging, and then you go socialize it with 3 other departments, and then finance is like, "I don't know if I really understand that," and you're like, "Ooh, okay, that didn't land. Let me try again." And so wherever you are, you just got to start the process.
And then as a leader, right, if Dutch comes to me and I'm like, that's not really what I meant, I have to have the humility to say, I haven't done a good job communicating commander's intent downstream and providing those guardrails. So how do I fix that? How do I better communicate that? right? Because Dutch is just trying to do the right thing. Obviously, I haven't communicated as a leader what the right thing is, not Dutch is a screw up and he just doesn't get it, right? So that's how toxic cultures form. And that's maybe another podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of folks wanting to join that one. Well, I'm super glad to hear that technology is going to solve this problem for us.
Yeah.
Oh wait,
No, frameworks.
You didn't say frameworks. No, I mean, as long as humans are in the mix, we have to deal with the human element, and the human element is driven by the culture that either is created for them or that they create. And I think we all, what I'm hearing in honesty, not in being a stupid ass, is that we have an opportunity to help shape that and be part of it if we're asked to as well. So, Rock and Dutch, this was fun. Appreciate
Yeah, it was awesome.
Appreciate you guys sharing this.
Yeah, thanks, Sean.
You guys.
And thanks everybody for listening to this episode. You'll have a chance. I'm going to put a ton of links in the show notes for this, tweet posts, and some resources that Dutch and Rock provided, and good steps to get started. So thanks everybody. Thanks Rock. Thanks Dutch.
Thanks.
Good talking to you.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
HITRUST is a leading data protection standards development and certification organization that strives to safeguard sensitive information and manage information risk for global organizations across all industries and throughout the third-party supply chain. Learn more at hightrustalliance.net. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Redefining Security podcast. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share ITSPmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.